Hi everybody, it's Steve with Steve's Bay 3 Garage, back after a bit of a hiatus. I'm here today. I'm going to give you some thoughts and opinions and observations on Sainsmart's Genmitsu CNC router 3020 Pro Max. Now the 3020 Pro Max, as I understand it, was released late in 2021. It's about that time I was thinking of getting a CNC router of my own and looked at all the 3018s. Saw three YouTubers do reviews on it right around Christmas 2021. And I was fairly impressed with what they had to say. These are some of the big names in the CNC router arena and 3D printing arena, and you could probably find their YouTube reviews. They'll show you all the ins and outs and details and nitty-gritties of it. So I jumped on board right around the first of the year of 2022. And at that time, Amazon was down to about 6 left. Hurry, order now. So I got one of those. I've had it now about a month and a half and played around with a bit and got some observations for you. I'm going to give you a little bit of a different take on this. I was, before I retired last year, an operations manager in a machine shop. So I'm not at all unfamiliar with CNC machines, not at all unfamiliar with CNC mills. However, the ones I dealt with were the big industrial types. Nonetheless, I wanted to get a little benchtop unit for myself, kind of a hobby unit if you will, and thought I'd give you my take on this, knowing that I'm coming from the big boys to a benchtop hobby one. Couple of things, and I think the other YouTube reviews will point out a lot of these features. It was fairly easy to assemble. They give you a really nice manual that is fairly comprehensive, has a lot of the details in it, as well as they give you all the necessary tools and even more so to put it together. I tried to collect all the tools and did a little 3D printing of my own and put in a few other things, spare collets, cutter, etc. But you get the idea. Few things that I have as observation. One of the things is this tabletop is not a T-slot style, but instead it has the hole patterns. Now in industry, all the big machines have T-slots in them, but quite often we would buy specialty plates that had hole patterns in them and use those for our fixturing, where we could mount dowels in some of them and wedge clamps in others, and you would slide your part in against the dowels to position two sides of a block you might be working on, and then have a wedge clamp to hold it down. So I wasn't at all upset about getting this type of plate instead of a T-slot style. A couple of things though. First of all, the clamps they send you, best I can say is, yes, they do work, but they're a little fiddly to play around with and adjust and whatnot. In fact, I'm looking at making some traditional step clamps to get past that a little bit. The other thing that struck me, they wanted to be nice and symmetrical about their hole pattern, and if you do the math, these bolt holes are on a 56 millimeter by 47.5 millimeter pattern. I went, what? Why not a standard, like a 40 by 40 or 50 by 50 pattern? whatever. It can still work. You can still do quite a bit with it. Put maybe some stop blocks or again, pins or whatever to stop, and then I'm thinking I'll get some little wedge clamps that would hold things in like that. I wish it was a little bit more of a standard hole pattern, because then would be able to get some standard vices to bolt down and things like that. Otherwise, it does have minimal flex and seems fairly solid as it is. A couple of the other impressions, one of the big things they point out on this one is that the linear rails. You know what, I'll tell you, the big machines have the exact same style of rails, a lot of them. Many of the biggest industrial machines will have box ways, but a lot of them have this style of rails nowadays. Granted, they're quite a bit bigger than this, but it is fairly accepted. Couple of things are they would be very solid and give you smooth riding, with the exception of what I ran into when I was moving the axis along here. It started stalling out in the same spot. What I had to do was loosen and retighten these bolts that hold it on, because I think it was being pulled a little too tight and it just kind of bound up in an area. I think you'll see on some other various YouTube videos how people talk about it'll stall out or whatever when it's binding and you have to adjust the rods. Well, you got the same thing with this. That if it's not perfectly straight, you can bind it up a little bit. So that was one thing I learned. That's all still the same kind of stuff to keep it tuned up. I was impressed that the lead screws are fairly precise. They are loaded. When you get in there and take a look at them, you'll see that they are spring loaded, so you don't get a lot of play going back and forth. If you have a nut and bolt, and you can kind of see this sometimes, a nut and bolt will have a little play between the two of them. Well, very important when you're machining that as you go from one direction to the other, you don't want the lead screw to be moving before the carriage moves and lose some of that precision. So that was nice. And I found that on all the axes. So good point there. One of the things that does kind of bug me, and again, kind of looking at the big industrial machines, is what we would call way covers. So the bedways would typically have some type of flexible cover or collapsing cover that as it moved back and forth would keep chips and grime and everything else from getting in there and wearing out your machine over time. Still trying to figure that out, what I'm going to do there. Otherwise, you're just going to have to spend a lot of time cleaning between uses. The other thing, wiring. Kind of wires everywhere, and I'm still trying to figure out the best way to wire it up. I started making some 3D printed items that I can put the wires to, and that would go into the channels and kind of self-lock. Obviously a lot of tie wraps and whatnot here and there, but still, you get around the backside, you see just a ton of wiring. Couple other things I'm sitting there wondering about. I did have some problems when I was using this hitting the limit switch on this side. It just seems to be in an awkward position and catching on it. I'm betting one of these days someone's going to come out with a modification where you can buy some prox switches and put them on instead of these limit switches. Would be kind of nice and wouldn't hang up, and you wouldn't be grabbing those or hitting these and potentially bending them. So that's maybe something to look at for the future there. Otherwise, like I said, outside of figuring out how and where to wire it, I thought it was fairly well laid out. I know some people don't like the E-stop on the side where you hit it. That didn't bother me. Seemed to be fairly reasonable to go in there and grab it. What I don't like is the fact that the wires come out behind it and are in your work envelope almost. So here, I'll take a little bit of a walk around here. Bear with me as we grab the camera and get up. So there you can see where the E-stop wires come out in the back, and you can kind of see where if you're working down in here, you can hit the limit switch. Again, not a showstopper or anything, but just a little bit of a nuisance. And again, a view of the wiring. No, I haven't optimized it or anything, and I'm still maybe every couple of days I'll say, oh, I should do this like this and see what happens there. Let me come around here a minute. The other thing was the power supply. Decent power supply, but it was just there, loose. So I quick drew up and 3D printed some holders for the power supply so I could mount it and have it kind of secure there. Just to give you some food for thought there. Overall, what am I thinking about this thing? Hey, I think it's going to be fun. I've done a little bit of work on it. I think it's got the power for wood and plastic, no problem. Haven't tried aluminum with it. I think it would do it if you were to have the right cutters. I'd have to order up some, what I'd say, more commercial, industrial milling cutters and use those. I'm not totally sold on what I see on Amazon. I know that you can go to some commercial places and get them fairly reasonably priced, well under $10 a piece for even high-speed steel and carbide cutters. You just have to order them from your traditional industrial suppliers. As far as the software, so far I've used both the Candle and UGS to drive it. Most of the products I'm making, I'm using FreeCAD to design up, and I've started working with the FreeCAD Path program to use that to generate my CNC G code. Couple of good products there. Really like that. Of course, I had the background in parametric CAD drafting, so it was easy for me to move to that. And I think there's plenty of sources on YouTube on how to learn to use those. So, with that, hey, looking forward to having fun with this some more. Like I said, I've been just kind of playing with it so far the last several weeks. One thing I will say, it's a little unique and different compared to the big machines I've worked with, but overall I'm fairly impressed with the precision. I put the old dial indicator on it. It's a little tough with the magnetic base since it's all aluminum, but saw that the runouts and the precision and everything was quite good. So there's my quick view and thoughts on the Sainsmart's Genmitsu CNC router 3020 Pro Max. From what I can tell, they're going to have them back in stock probably late February, March. A little hard to tell for sure, but that's kind of the impression I got, especially looking at the Sainsmart's website. So, hope this helps. Overall, again, really nice product. I think it has some features that justify the extra price above the standard 3018 machines. Let's just hope they get them on the market soon. And looking for all you other folks out there to come up with ideas, improvements, and enhancements, be it the way covers, maybe proc switches, other little things. What's the best way to tidy up the wiring, maybe? So, till next time, again, Steve from Steve's Bay Garage. Thanks.